Welcome to Not Quite the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese, and I'm recording this little bonus mini episode for all of you for Easter weekend 2022. We are taking this weekend off from doing the regular show. We did not, however, mean to take the previous week off from releasing shows. We do have 2 episodes recorded, but due to stuff beyond our control, those episodes could not be edited and released this past week, and we're really bummed out about that. But we are excited to bring them to you in the coming week. We have a cool episode on last week's Star Trek Picard, wherein you will get to hear us both gush about the episode, and you'll get to hear me rant about it a little bit. You don't get to hear me rant very much on the show, but I did have some issues with that episode, and I did let Mike know about that. But then we also have a really cool episode on Star Trek the Motion Picture. We've wanted to do an episode on the motion picture for a long time. It was really cool to do it. Of course, we just had the great Director's Edition, the new 4K Director's Edition, released last week, and that was our reason for doing that. And so, again, disappointed that we could not bring that to you yet, but we will. So I thought I would come here to both tell you that and, share some thoughts with you for Easter, because I hope that you are taking a break this Easter, just as we are. I hope that you are taking some time to Sabbath and to contemplate the resurrection of Christ and what it means. And I realize that, our listenership encompasses a lot of different people, and you might not be there yet in terms of the resurrection of Christ being a real thing, a physical resurrection. You might be in that space where, Jesus resurrects metaphorically or something like that, and that's okay. What I want you to do, though, what I hope you will do, is hold space for Jesus overcoming death and Christ overcoming the things that hold us back, and to find pathways toward new life in your journey this weekend and this week. Star Trek, of course, deals with Christ figures, as we talked about last year. If you want to go listen to our Christ figure series, this would be a great time to do it. Particularly the episode on Spock, The Needs of the Many, would be a great one to listen to. We talk about Spock as a Christ figure in Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, which is also a theme in my book, The Gospel According to Star Trek, The Original Crew. I do a chapter on each film that covers, Spock and Kirk and company. And in Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, of course, I explore this story of Spock as a Christ figure. And hey, if you haven't seen those films and you don't want spoilers, sorry. You can stop listening for a few minutes. But I'm going to read a paragraph from my chapter on Star Trek 3, because Spock has died in Star Trek 2, given his life for not just Kirk, not just the Enterprise, but potentially for all humanity, depending on how where Khan might have gone after taking his revenge on Kirk. He gives his life in that film, and then is returning in Star Trek 3, and it takes a while for all that to come together. I refer to Star Trek 3 and to a lot of things in Star Trek, but particularly Star Trek 3, as scripture jazz. There are images in Star Trek 3 that are very biblical, or they seem very biblical, right? But they're jumbled, and they happen in different ways and in different order than just a direct sort of retelling of the resurrection of Jesus. But it's interesting, the imagery that's in here. And particularly in a moment where, early in the film, where Spock's quarters have been sealed. Kirk has ordered them sealed, and no one is to go in there. And yet Chekhov finds life signs inside Spock's quarters, inside the quarters of a dead person. He finds life. And Kirk goes to check it out. And Scotty's right there next to Chekhov. And that's where my paragraph picks up. "I'm not crazy," Chekhov says to Scotty in Russian. "There it is. Chekhov sees life where there should be none. When Kirk arrives, the seal is broken, the door is open, and the guards, wearing red helmets and breastplates, stand without saying a word. Jesus' tomb was similarly sealed, but when the women arrived at the tomb, they found the seal was broken, and the stone was rolled away. The Roman soldiers guarding the tomb, to whom the Starfleet security officers in this scene bear a striking resemblance, were shaken and became like dead men. While these officers don't seem spooked, they are certainly silent. Mary met someone at the tomb whom she thought was the gardener, but was actually Jesus. In a kind of inverse of that scene, Kirk thinks he hears Spock, but finds McCoy. But Spock, through McCoy, is actually speaking. He tells Kirk to go to Mount Saleia on Vulcan. Jesus tells Mary to gather the disciples and meet with him in Galilee. So, like Jesus, Spock says, in essence, go to the place where I am from and meet me there. It's just one of a couple of sort of resurrection scenes in this film. The other striking one of which, of course, is when David and Saavik go to essentially Spock's tomb and find Spock gone, but his grave clothes neatly folded and left behind, which is also really interesting. And there's a lot of that sort of stuff in Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. And I encourage you to check out the episodes, the episode Needs of the Many on Spock as a Christ figure, and check out the chapters in the Gospel According to Star Trek, the original crew, because it's a good thing to meditate on this time of year. But I'm struck by the fact that this is a real thing that is happening. And in Star Trek 3, it's met with a lot of incredulity and skepticism. There's a lot of doubt around it. Chekhov, Kirk, Admiral Morrow, they all look at this and say, this can't be. But what ultimately, at least Kirk and Chekhov and everybody else on the Enterprise has to say is, well, this can't be, but maybe it is. And if, therefore, maybe it is, I've got to check it out. I've got to pursue it as though it is real, because the chance that it is real means that something wonderful could be happening. And if I don't pursue that, if I let this opportunity slip through my fingers, Kirk says, I could lose my own soul. That would have been the cost, according to Kirk, if he hadn't gone through with it. Because he had to pursue Spock in Star Trek 3. He had to go after it. The possibility that Spock would be alive. And I think a lot of us might be in that space. A lot of us might be in that space where it's difficult to believe that Jesus returned from the dead. And that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person or a bad Christian or whatever. It just means you're a person with, intelligence, who knows how death normally works. It's a pretty indomitable thing in our existence, and that's the beauty of Christ, that's the beauty of the gospel, is the victory over death. And death comes into our lives in a lot of different ways. We can die at times, it feels, emotionally. We can die in our ability to love one another. And we can also give ourselves sacrificially in many ways. And that self-sacrificial giving is a way that we can overcome the power of death in those small ways in our own selves and in our own lives. And there are all kinds of little resurrections that happen. And so I encourage you to cling on to those things. And not to use a Star Trek pun there, that wasn't my intention, but I do encourage you to cling to those things, to hold on to those things, to hold on to those things that remind us that, maybe death doesn't have the final word. Because that's what Jesus' resurrection is all about. Jesus' resurrection is a testament to his divinity and to the participation of the divine in the human. And there is a sense that we are caught up with and we are connected to, and we get to join in with Jesus' resurrection and we ourselves get to be resurrected in those small ways and also in those ultimate ways, those big ways that matter very, very much. But it's hard for us to go there. It's hard for us to accept the big ways, and that's okay. But I do encourage you to contemplate the resurrection, and do so through Star Trek if you're able. There's a poem that I have shared for probably 20 years around Easter. I always kind of end up circling back to it even if I don't plan to. It's a poem by John Updike, the great writer, novelist. And he wrote it actually for his church. His church gave had a religion arts festival and offered $100 prize, which he won with this poem. It's called 7 Stanzas at Easter, and I'm going to share it with you now. Make no mistake. If he rose at all, it was as his body. If the cell's dissolution did not reverse, the molecules reknit, the amino acids rekindle, the church will fall. It was not as the flowers, each soft spring recurrent. It was not as his spirit in the mouths and fuddled eyes of the 11 apostles. It was as his flesh, ours. The same hinged thumbs and toes, the same valved heart that pierced, died, withered, paused, and then regathered, out of enduring might, new strength to enclose. Let us not mock God with metaphor, analogy, sidestepping transcendence, making of the event a parable, a sign painted in the faded credulity of earlier ages. Let us walk through the door. The stone is rolled back, not papier-mâché, not a stone in a story, but the vast rock of materiality that in the slow grinding of time will eclipse for each of us the wide light of day. And if we will have an angel at the tomb, make it a real angel, weighty with Max Planck's quanta, vivid with hair, opaque in the dawn light, robed in real linen, spun on a definite loom. Let us not seek to make it less monstrous for our own convenience, our own sense of beauty, lest, awakened in one unthinkable hour, we are embarrassed by the miracle and crushed by remonstrance. I know I just said that it's okay if you're not there yet with the reality of the resurrection. And it is. It really is. Faith is a process. But I want to share that idea with you, that the reality of the resurrection does matter, that it's important, because I want you to contemplate it as a thing that really could be. And that if it is real, I love that Updike starts with if, right? If he rose at all, if it is real, then it's profoundly important. And think of that moment that Kirk has to have when he says, I'm going to do this thing that seems crazy. Think of him standing there with McCoy in his arms, having just spoken with the voice of Spock, telling him to go to Saleya on Vulcan, knowing that he has to go and do something profound on faith, which is not necessarily what he would choose to do, not necessarily what he would be comfortable with doing. But he's beginning to have that handed to him. Think of receiving that truth and that reality and pursue it as best you can. Contemplate it as best you know how. It's not a requirement for you to understand these things, for you to have these things settled in your mind. The only thing that you need to do is try. Try out those ideas and see where they lead you. I hope that you find something restorative in this Easter season. I hope that you find some renewal. And as our own show has gone through a momentary death, a gap, not really a death, but a gap in our production. And as we pause and sort of let our breath out and take it up again in the coming week and get back to what we do, I hope you also will let your breath out and be prepared to take a fresh one. If you can go to an Easter sunrise service, I encourage you to do that. It's a beautiful thing to contemplate the resurrection of Jesus at the rising of the sun. And that kind of imagery actually is in Star Trek 3 as well, the rising of the sun, in Star Trek 2 as well. And I hope you'll contemplate that. I hope you will think anew about Christ restoring not just his own life, not just all of creation as happens in Star Trek 4, but as perhaps most happens in Star Trek 3, restoring you. That you can and will be restored. That whatever dark night of the soul you might be going through, where you might not feel very celebratory this Easter, that you're not alone, first of all, because Christ suffered, and God shares in your suffering through Christ. And because there are other people who experience the same sort of things and have moved through the same sort of things with whom you can talk. Not only are you not alone in that, but you're not alone in the fact that you will get through. You will get through. If you hold on, you will get through. Lean on the people around you. They're gifts from God. Lean on people you can trust. And find those smaller and yet somehow just as big and just as significant forms of resurrection in your life. That's it for now. I appreciate you taking the opportunity to listen to this. Hey, our subscribers get this kind of stuff every time we put out episodes. I come and I share my thoughts, and I also share outtakes and goofy stuff as well. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, also, while you're at it, check out what we would be doing on our news this week. We would be sharing this cool thing you should check out on YouTube, Star Trek The Next Generation Animated, TNG Animated. It's really cool. It's actually something a fella made as a gift for his wife's birthday. That's really cool. And there's an article, actually a little interview that I have linked to in the description. I've also linked to in the description an article about that John Updike poem, 7 Stanzas at Easter. It is written by Dave Shellhaas, who is Professor Emeritus of English at Dordt University. It's one of the more insightful things I have read on this poem. It's for a blog called In All Things. Go check that out. And as always, we hope that you will, as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.